I gotta do it, man.
Thomas, there are certain risks that involve making this type of video. I hope you understand them.
Damn it. Alright, listen here. The prequels, they suck. People on the internet, they think they're great. And you know what? They're not. People, I see them calling Rian Johnson a hack. Like the best episode of Breaking Bad. You know what pisses me off even more? The way they treat this sequel trilogy. Someone has to be the milquetoast voice that this conversation needs. Try and stop me. I'd like to consider myself the prime demographic for a Star Wars movie. My name is Thomas, I play video games, I grew up watching all 6 original movies, I'm a science major, and I'm about the age of a typical viewer of a Star Wars film. My point is, when people think Star Wars fan, I would like to think I'm one of the archetypes they think of. I mean, come on, I've read countless comics, I could probably tell you the entire Sith lineage, and I'm a colloquial expert of both legends and canon continuity for Star Wars. I mean shit, I even own an Ultra Saber. However, I wouldn't say I'm a fanboy by any measure. I'd argue that we Star Wars fans have a very abusive relationship with the filmmakers at this point, especially given the sequel trilogy and the prequels. So, now that the sequel trilogy is over, I have this deep feeling of upsetment and sadness at the vitriolic hatred that these movies have received. Do I think that they're great movies? No. Do I think they're terrible? Absolutely not. If anything, they're better films than most movies that are coming out today. So I'm going to construct a carefully assembled video essay that's going to carefully explain to you why I believe the sequel trilogy is way too overhated. I believe it's hated onto a vitriolic extent, and I believe that oftentimes the critical flaws in these movies can be traced back to earlier entries in the saga. If you don't like the sequel trilogy, I can really respect that. In fact, I'm not even going to try and make the claim that these movies aren't massively flawed. They have a lot of problems, and I can definitely understand why some people don't like them. However, I found some of the reactions to these movies to be a little bit over the top. A 0? You gave this movie a 0? Do you know what a fucking 0? Like, let's be clear here. A 0 means it got nothing right. A 0 is a movie like Jack and Jill, or the Star Wars Holiday Special, or After Last Season, or The Incredible fucking Bulk. I mean, you got boom mics hanging in the shots, nobody knows their lines, the director's Dexter Jettster. Maybe then it's a little warranted to give the movie a 0, but I mean, these are way too overblown reactions. In fact, these movies are arguably pretty good. So, what am I trying to do? I'm going to make the case in a multi-part video series on a couple things. First of all, the prequels are the worst Star Wars films. Second, The Force Awakens is a great movie. In fact, I think it's the only one in the trilogy that gets the word great. Third, Rian Johnson is a talented director. He's not a hack. I mean, when people call him a hack, it really gets under my skin, but we'll get to that later. The Last Jedi had a lot of missteps, but it had really good fundamental ideas and some amazing moments that understand the entire saga better than all the films before it. It's really a weird egg, and I can't wait to dive into that. Thirdly, The Rise of Skywalker is admittedly a bit of a train wreck, but its fundamental flaws were brought on by an overall lack of vision and inconsistent directorial vision. Once again, it has a lot of highlights that redeem this movie from being awful. So that's my thoughts, very condensed on all three and what this video essay is going to do. These movies are, truth be told, better than the majority of things coming out in theaters. Along the way, I'm going to make a couple arguments that penetrate through all the films. Mainly, I believe Rey isn't a Mary Sue to the degree that people claim she is, like, at all. I believe that Adam Driver carried the entire trilogy and the intrigue and consistency solely on his back, and he's an incredible actor. I also believe the cast, crew, and directors did a fantastic job, given what they had to work with. I don't expect you to agree with everything I'm going to say in this series. I mean, shit, talking about the Star Wars sequels in a positive light is viewed by some in the same light as coming out in fake. So I was going to say something funny in the original take, but, wasn't funny. So, yeah, here's a joke. So, what I do ask is that you keep an open mind, and by the end, maybe you'll be able to say that the movies weren't as bad as you thought. In fact, they were arguably pretty decent films. The video is going to be released in 3 parts, each one compartmentalizing each film pretty much. So without wasting any more time, let's just jump right into this and go for it. So let's talk about the prequels.
This is where the fun begins.
So I grew up with these movies. I loved them like nothing else. I still do, to be completely honest. Episode 1 is a guilty pleasure movie. Episode 3 is one of the best in the saga, in my opinion. And Episode 2 exists. However, we mustn't trick ourselves into thinking that these movies are actually better than they are. They're terrible attempts at filmmaking. They were made in an armchair on green screen, and unfortunately their major flaws overshadowed the cool message that the prequels were trying to convey. I'm not going to spend time telling you why these movies don't work, because there are plenty of people on YouTube who have done it in a much better way than I could. I refer you to the Mr. Plinkett video because it's probably funnier than I could ever be on a good day, but rest assured I could probably explain to you why these movies are bad films while completely blackout drunk. Oh shit! So let me tell you some new insights as to why I think these movies are overhyped and believed to be better than they actually are. So first, these movies have spawned a culture of some great-ass memes that relish their corny aspects. Trust me, my phone has enough of these memes to fill the entire Library of Congress. So the prequels of nothing are very quotable films, and as much as I'm sure some of you want to tell me that the ability to speak does not make me intelligent, allow me to say another fairly key point. The prequels have the benefit of being fleshed out with years of expanded universe lore. Both Clone Wars television shows, the numerous comics, the video games, the novels, they all fill in the gaps that these movies left open in their storytelling. So let me set up a hypothetical here. If you had to pick who the worst Star Wars character is, who would you pick? Jar Jar Binks? Watto? Zam Wessel? Dexter Jetster? No. And I believe that this answer might surprise you. It's Anakin Skywalker, in my opinion, and this is for one very simple reason. Taking Anakin Skywalker primarily, the first movie is just terrible with this character. The acting is abysmal, there's too much space Jesus crap going on. I mean, he was just a former Jedi turned dickhead in the originals, and that's really all he should have been in the prequels. The lore and expanded universe fleshed out this Chosen One prophecy. We then learned that Darth Plagueis conceived Anakin and that the Force was rebelling against a being of growing power by bringing something into sentience that would wipe out the Sith. I mean, it's cool shit, but none of this is in the prequel films. Anakin in the following two movies, and still the Phantom Menace to extent, I mean, he's just a bastard.
Liar! If you're not with me, then you're my enemy. You will not take it from me!
He treats Padme terribly, he's creepy, he supports a fascist ideology, he commits a small-scale genocide to the Sand People, he's annoying and ungrateful to Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon, and he brutally decapitates his surrendered opponent. I mean, people forget that Hayden Christensen won Razzies for his performance. I mean, the dude ain't no Robert De Niro, alright? So, why do we like Anakin now? It's because of the television shows and all the fleshing out that he got and whatnot. I mean, on that note, I cannot wait to see what they do with him in the Clone Wars television show. Watching Revenge of the Sith after seeing the television show is a really tragic experience. However, I should not have to sit through 40 hours of television, read 101 books, play 4 video games on 3 different consoles, and cherry-pick moments out of the movies to get a good narrative. That's generally not a good sign. The film is only as good as it is in isolation and in the context of the greater series of films, and we'll come back to that theme later when we talk about Rise of Skywalker. No other external media should predicate if you can enjoy and get a satisfying experience out of this film. Now, George Lucas's special effects work, it's to be commended. I believe that if we never got Jar Jar, we would be nowhere near the CGI capabilities we have to have things like the Marvel Cinematic Universe being done as well as it is. However, it's important to not delude ourselves into the lies of the Jedi. Lucas was known for filming scenes from a few static camera angles in one take, just so that he wouldn't have to reshoot them and he could just resplice them from the same goddamn chair. More often than not, he just resorted to A camera and B camera, all with expository scenes of people talking and walking, or sitting and walking, or walking and talking. It's just awful. Now, this isn't to say that I hate these films. Like I said earlier, I love them. In fact, I believe that if you cut all the General Grievous stuff out of Revenge of the Sith, it could very well be argued a top Star Wars movie. Why do I bring this up, though? I'm a very strong believer that the prequels are genius in concept, but just awful in execution. Now, a quick note on the original trilogy. It's great. Aside from The Return of the Jedi, the original trilogy is nearly flawless in both theory, concept, and execution. These movies are archetypes of the hero's journey, they're done really well, and while I'm not the biggest fan of Return of the Jedi, the movies are largely tonally consistent and tell a beautiful three-act coherent structure. These three movies can be argued as one of the best trilogies ever made, and honestly, it's kind of hard to deny that. I'm not going to spend time telling you what you already know. Vader kicks ass, Han shot first, Rip Carrie Fisher, and Mark Hamill is a saint off-screen and on-screen. Yes, the special editions are... God, they're abysmal, and they shouldn't exist, but enough of what we already know. Let's talk sequels.
I feel it again. The pull to the light.
The Force Awakens is the best possible return to form we could have asked for. I love this movie for many reasons, but three of the most prominent are probably related to the characters of Rey and Kylo Ren, the pacing, and generally the direction and cinematography of this film. The movie is honestly one of the best Star Wars films, and don't worry, I'm prepared to argue my case, so please hear me out. Before we go any further, I'm going to address a couple issues that I can already see arising. No, this movie isn't perfect. It's anything but, so don't accuse me of being a Disney fanboy. If Disney was paying my bills and if I was a shill, trust me, I wouldn't be recording this in a rundown office where I do my homework. Secondly, if you're the kind of person who is uncomfortable with Rey being in the movie because she is a female, go fuck yourself. If you think she's a Mary Sue, I don't like it, but I can understand where you're coming from, as I'd be willing to bet that characters like Leia or Ahsoka are probably among your favorites. The Mary Sue ideology, it arose for a couple reasons. Sloppy writing in The Last Jedi, and honestly there's a huge echo chamber for this kind of stuff on the internet, so when we get to the section, please hear me out for why she is not a Mary Sue. Lastly, if you have a problem with the diversity of these films, go fuck yourself. I don't care if my lead Jedi is a girl, white, black, Indian, Asian, or Dexter Jettster. What I care about is that they're well-written characters with story arcs and complexity. So, let's talk about the first thing on my little list, and that's the formula. It's admittedly a plagiarism of A New Hope, I'm not going to deny that. Most of its beats are ripped straight from the film. However, I give it a complete pass. Keep in mind that we've been on a near 33-year hiatus at this point since we've received a well-made Star Wars film. Like I said, I mean, we have a fairly abusive relationship with the people that make these movies. There was some understandable damage control that needed to be done by Kathleen Kennedy, and in that regard, having J.J. Abrams do a soft remake was really a great call. They needed the film to do well so they could get their feet in the door and do more movies in the future. I respect that, and honestly, if I were any of them, I doubt that I would have gone down any other route. Now, this isn't to say that I don't have problems with this movie, I do. For example, it undid a perfectly good ending with no explanation of how the First Order rose, why the Republic was so weak, and why there's no standing army to defend it. To the credit of the prequels, they often relished in minutiae like this, so I did really miss it in this trilogy. But anyways, the damage control plot works really well. In fact, I believe it does a couple things better than A New Hope, even though A New Hope is probably still the better film despite my own biases. One of the things I feel this movie does really well is pacing. The movie's a non-stop adventure. It effectively moves the characters where they need to be, doesn't waste your time, and manages to meet the pace of the original Star Wars movie while still making time for some slow character development moments. Speaking of characters, let's talk about Rey. While she definitely isn't the strongest point in the movie, I really love her in this film particularly, and I resent the notion that people think she's a Mary Sue. So please allow me to make my argument for her not being a Mary Sue, and The Force Awakens specifically, and I'm going to break down this Mary Sue argument movie for movie. So yeah, let's defend Rey. Wouldn't be the first bad idea I've had. Woo! 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 It's established that she spent her entire childhood scavenging ships and fighting for survival on the desert planet of not Tatooine. She's established in these scenes that she's a good mechanic, a good fighter, an excellent gymnast, and somebody who longs for the love from a family that she's never had. In fact, her pastime is scavenging fallen starships and Imperial-class Star Destroyers, so later in the film it makes sense that she knows the mechanics of how to fly a broken ship, or it makes sense that she can climb on the surface of those cliffs in Starkiller Base. I mean, it's not like this stuff comes out of nowhere. The movie opens up with her wanting to leave Jakku and find her parents, and ends with her on the path to become a Jedi Knight. She has a character arc. But let's keep in mind that Anakin Skywalker was established to be video game levels of powerful, and Luke Skywalker, if you want to talk the Mary Sue argument about how Rey could do a single mind trick, I mean, let's talk about the fact that Luke Skywalker, who has never flown an X-Wing before and has never been trained as a Jedi, was able to make a shot 2 meters wide into the Death Star core while avoiding all those TIE fighters and shit. I mean, like, these kind of contrivances are everywhere in the Star Wars saga, so if you're going to nitpick the movie over something that small, I don't think that the Rey argument holds as much water. As to the argument I know I didn't address yet, that being the lightsaber fight at the end of the film, don't worry, that segment is going to get its own devoted portion of the video. Daisy Ridley is an amazing actress. She did a wonderful job in this film. I really like her character arc, and she did a good job establishing herself as the next generation hero because she was clearly being set up to be like a really special character with a cool backstory, and you can't really hold what the sequels did with that against the actual, like, you can't hold the sequels' decisions against The Force Awakens. You know, she used to be a bartender, like, she was a bartender, and then there's me, fucking around in college recording this video. Finn is perhaps the best character arc in this movie. He's a stormtrooper who follows orders and eventually defects because he refuses to fire on civilians. Back in the day, we actually used to think this dude was going to be our Jedi, and I find that really funny in retrospect. He then becomes somebody who just wants to run from all of his problems, especially the First Order. He even abandons Rey on Tagadana because he wants to run from his problems. It isn't until Rey's in danger that he changes as a character. In fact, he winds up completing his arc during the final confrontation with Kylo Ren. We're going to get to that part when we get to that part, but it's a shame that he doesn't do anything for the rest of the trilogy because in this movie he was excellent. However, the biggest reason that I love the characters in this movie has to do with the fact that it understands the psychology and characterization of Anakin Skywalker better than George Lucas was able to articulate in the prequel trilogy. God, that statement is really gonna piss off the fans. Well, better state my case.
Well, you've lost it.
You'll excuse me?
He's just a kid, he's conflicted, and he's clearly struggling between the light and dark sides of the Force. If you're angry that he wasn't an overpowering badass Sith Lord from the start, then I'm afraid you've missed the point. Allow me to state one of the themes of this video. Just because you don't like a specific decision that was made, that doesn't make it a bad decision. There's a difference between plot consistency and plot direction, and I feel like that line gets really muddled by the people who make a literal living out of trashing on these movies. Trust me, I'm gonna have to remind myself of this rule a lot when we talk about the final film in the trilogy, so I kind of get where they're coming from, but still, let's be real here.
What's the matter with you? I feel like a Kentucky Fried Idiot.
His acting is incredible, and he's got a really iconic design to him and a great theme. The character of Kylo Ren is easily the grip of this film, even though I don't think he was intended to be. Every scene that he is in, he steals, regardless of which trilogy film we're talking about here. From his amazing introduction in the beginning of the film, to his temper tantrums, to his brutal murder of Han Solo, everything he does is cinematic magic in this movie. So allow me to explain why. If you want to see him flex his acting muscles, you should really watch Marriage Story on Netflix. It's incredible, and he's nominated for Best Actor at multiple award venues.
Every day I wake up and I hope you're dead.
Okay, back to the fun stuff. I've heard some people complain about Kylo Ren in this movie, so I'm going to dispel a couple main arguments. Firstly, people complain that Kylo is a spoiled brat, and honestly, you're right. That was the point. Kylo Ren is just a kid that made a dumb call, and he's too afraid to make the decision to turn back to his family, despite how much he clearly wants to. It's made clear that he hates Luke Skywalker, not Han and Leia or the Jedi. He just doesn't know how to lead an empire, and his temper tantrums show how angry, impulsive, and immature the character is. It reminds me of how a certain prequel character should have been characterized as. It's very clear that the only reason he wears this mask in the movie is to emanate big dick energy to those who defy him, and I really like that Adam Driver tends to underhint a little bit of fear behind a lot of his line delivery in this movie. His scene with Han Solo on the bridge in the reactor core of Starkiller Base, we'll get to it later, but it's easily the best scene in the entire film, and it can be argued as a highlight of the saga. He cried doing it. Did you know? He's crying in that scene. I'm sorry, Kylo Ren is a whiny bitch, and he thinks his shit doesn't stink. But to be completely honest, that's the Anakin that we should have gotten in episode 2 and 3. I gravitate back and forth on if Kylo Ren is the best character in Star Wars, but I'm feeling pretty solidly that he is as I talk about this. I have to admit that if you look only at the source material, let's look at A New Hope and The Force Awakens in isolation and compare them. He is a much better character than Darth Vader in literally every meaning of the word, and I'm ready to explain myself because I know that what I just said is probably punishable by death to some Star Wars people.
See you in hell, candy boys!
Vader was just a muscle guy in the first Star Wars. Sure, he kicks ass and he's intimidating, and we learned that he used to be a Jedi, but that's it. Like, it's arguably what made him iconic, because we didn't know much about him, and he was really threatening. While I will concede that Vader is a better comic book villain in that movie for sake of a better argument, Kylo Ren is an infinitely better character. We see his psychology, his powers, his fears, and his weaknesses. However, most importantly, we see his flaws. I'm sorry. Similar to how I'd rather see a heartfelt lightsaber duel in the original trilogy over whatever the fuck that was. I'd rather see a complex, fleshed-out antagonist over a one-dimensional villain. If you compare the antagonist of the first films in isolation, Kylo Ren will take the cake every single day of the week. So before moving on from this movie, I'd like to address a couple things. Firstly, I'll concede that the movie's weak points involve Starkiller Base feeling way too plagiarized. Snoke had no character to speak of, there was no explanation of how we hit the hard reset on the continuity. Poe's bizarre return is still jarring every time I watch the movie. There's a weird Scottish bounty hunting and space squid scene with Harrison Ford. It's really weird. And the fact that the movie in general leaves a lot of stuff to the comics to wrap up is particularly lazy. The one thing that I really hate about this film is that they never explain where Anakin's old lightsaber came from. Maz Kanata just kind of goes, "Oh, great question, for another time," and practically just, gives the audience the finger. They never even answer that question in the whole trilogy, which is, I think, one of the most egregious plot holes. However, like I said, I'm really not here to bash the film, especially since I genuinely love the part of the film that we're about to talk about. So, let me return to The Force Awakens and talk about the climax.
You need a teacher!
My God, I fucking love the ending scenes of this movie. Let me close by refuting on the most common arguments against this film in this particular segment. I've heard many a critic tell me that the final lightsaber fight is underwhelming, it undermines Kylo's character, it makes Rey a Mary Sue, it's disrespectful to Han Solo, and doesn't live up to the hype. I disagree with every single part of that sentence, and I'm about to tell you why. The final confrontation, which arguably starts the minute that Han Solo confronts his son on the bridge and ends when Kylo Ren is beat, is probably my favorite 10 minutes in all of Star Wars, as it understands what makes a great movie in Star Wars better than the entire prequel trilogy before it. Best of all, it's not a plagiarism. Like, the best stuff in this movie is wholly original from here on out. To note, I'm not talking about Starkiller Base. It's very lackluster and derivative, so Poe's sequence to blow it up, we just kind of like, alright, let's move it along, let's get back to the interesting stuff. So, with that being said, let's start with the confrontation between Han Solo and Ben Solo. I'm going to do the best I can to avoid copyright strikes, so please bear with me throughout this deep dive. Han sees his son on the bridge and calls out to him. Kylo's reaction, the lighting, and their conversation is heart-wrenching, and it's very obvious that Ben Solo wants to go back with his dad but feels trapped. The cinematography in this scene alone eclipses the quality of the filmmaking present in the entire prequel trilogy, and honestly I would say even a lot of the original trilogy. God damn, like, as if I wasn't already gonna get slaughtered in the comments of this video, I just keep digging my grave, don't I? To claim that this movie is worse than the prequels, or, that's just blasphemy. The scene is amazing in a horrible way. It's such a tragic incident of history repeating itself. Kylo Ren's lines are amazingly delivered and written. Imagine if Anakin and Obi-Wan on their final confrontation had dialogue like this instead of what we actually got. "You turned against me. You have done that yourself. You will not take her from me?
I mean, like, Jesus Christ, it's like night and day. How can you people not see this?
The beautiful cinematography, the light change, the violent sound of the lightsabers hiss, and the pain in both Ben and Han's face, it makes it a classic for me. I love it. And the madness begins. Once Han is killed, Chewbacca goes crazy and nails Kylo in the chest with a blast from a bowcaster, and it's been established to be pretty painful to say the least. I mean, Kylo is not having a good time. Rey and Finn make a run for it, and Kylo Ren is waiting for them outside. Kylo Ren challenges them, and we clearly see him with both limped gait and a massive bleeding injury. He tries to beat himself to grow stronger in the dark side, but it's very clear that Kylo Ren is not on his A game. As we saw earlier, he isn't immersed in the dark side because of how hard it was to kill Han. So banging on his chest isn't really doing anything. His confliction is going to make him weaker. That's how the dark side works. He smashes Rey into a tree, and Finn finally completes his character arc by picking up the lightsaber and fighting for something he believes in instead of running from his problems. The movie comes full circle, and Finn's abandonment is standing right there in the snow. People sometimes say that Finn put up a good fight, and yeah, you're wrong. Kylo is toying with him, and it's very clear. He relishes in torturing Finn, as shown with a crossguard lightsaber, and he's been taking the fight like a joke, so eventually Finn gets a hit in. Kylo Ren claps his cheeks in less than 3 seconds. I counted. What makes the scene beautiful is that Finn knew he was gonna lose. He wasn't expecting to win, but he fights for the first time for something he believes in, that being Rey, because, you know, they were developing romantic feelings for that character at the time. We then get my second favorite scene in the film. It's very clear that this girl isn't just some girl. She's learning powers very quickly, and that lightsaber came to her and called to her multiple times throughout the film. There's a reason for that, and it fuels a lot of the mystery behind this film. I can't hold the underwhelming reveals in the next movie against this film, because at the time, I remember, and if you were there, you were there. People were theorizing on the internet. They were saying, oh, is Rey Obi-Wan's daughter? You know, is Rey related to Palpatine? Is Rey related to Plagueis? Yada, yada, yada. There were even some really bizarre ones. I read a funny one related to Dexter Jettster. We get one of the best lightsaber duels in the entire saga. The music is tense, the choreography behind Kylo Ren is raw and powerful, and his entire fighting style is based off slams and pushing the opponent back. They actually fought with prop swords that glowed the color of their lightsaber, so the lighting on their faces is semi-accurate. Kylo swings at Rey in the air, he's chasing her, they're hitting the rocks, they're hitting trees, they're seething their blades in the snow. Fight feels gritty. Feels real. Don't feel rehearsed. He's trying to kill her. You know, and it carries the emotional resonance that was present in the original trilogy. The fight has some of the best aspects of the prequels in terms of the special effects, but it then takes the heart and the subtext and the choreography style of the originals and just blends them in such a really cool way. I love it. The defeat of Kylo Ren is where a lot of people have problems. People don't like that Rey kicked his ass in the end, and I believe there are reasons for why it makes sense for both characters.
I mean, don't even hit me with that, Disney sequels aren't canon crap. You mean to tell me that you would rather see, the Count Dooku versus Anakin fight in a movie theater as opposed to this? I mean, just look at it.
As you see, my Jedi powers are far beyond yours.
Oh boy, it looks like it's suicide again for me.
As for Rey, she's definitively losing this fight until she lets the Force in. Kylo's been pushing her back and slamming her down. I feel like her letting the Force in is her being guided by previous Jedi, and especially with the last movie, my theory's kind of been validated a little bit. The ground splitting beneath them only furthers the point that the Force is kind of an existential character in this game, which I find is a really cool idea. I'm kind of glad that the sequels have been toying with it. In addition, Kylo Ren is caught off guard by her letting the Force in, so it makes sense that he's defeated. So let's look at Kylo and why he lost, as I believe that the majority of the reason that the fight went down the way it did has nothing to do with Rey. It's very obvious that she got lucky and had timing on her side and the Force intervened. He lost because he was conflicted in his allegiance to the dark side. He was in a massive amount of pain. He was overconfident when he tried to turn Rey to the dark side, and he's done 2 consecutive fights with practically a massive bleeding injury in his side. Let's be clear here. Kylo Ren was winning, definitively. He was pushing her back, throwing her off balance, even puts her lightsaber into a lock and nearly yeets her off a cliff. Kylo Ren losing does not trivialize his character. It once again, it adds this little thing to his characterization that you might have heard about in your English class. It's called depth. He is not a comic book villain, but that's okay. He's a fleshed out character. I'd rather see this 10-minute sequence over watching the Phantom Menace duel, despite how greatly that fight is choreographed. Also, quick note on Han Solo, because I haven't said that once, even though this is like his standout movie. I haven't said much because I feel like he's one of the aspects of this film that people more or less agree is pretty good. Harrison Ford did a great job. He really helped set up Ben as an intriguing character, as well as having really good one-liners throughout this movie. The Force Awakens is a great movie. Is it on the level of the original trilogy? Well, I'd argue it's at least better than Return of the Jedi, so an honorable mention in that category is at least warranted. It's more consistent, it doesn't have stupid toy bait like Ewoks or Porgs, it's got great action, its writing eclipses the prequels.
You're going slowly on the left. Taking it now! No, Anakin, no! No!
And Rey and Finn have great chemistry. Not to mention Kylo Ren is the most meaningful addition to the Star Wars lore since we originally got Darth Vader. So, I mean, honestly, this movie is probably one of the best Star Wars films, behind A New Hope and The Empire Strikes Back, of course. Part 2 of this video series should be coming soon, and oh god, I am so fucking afraid of making this video. The comments are gonna be like, I don't even want to see comments on this video, let alone the next video. So with that being said, next time we're talking about The Last Jedi.
God damn it. God fucking damn it. God damn it. Fuck.
A minute. What's up?
They're here. They're here, Thomas.
Who's here?
The Last Jedi haters, Thomas. They're fucking here.
Fuck! Alright,
Fucking damn it.
We gotta go quickly. No time! No time! What about my homework?
damn it.
This is due tomorrow! Oh, fuck! I don't have time!
You knew the risks, Thomas.
Fuck, I can't do this!
You knew the risk. Why did you do it?
Someone had to stand up for Ran! I'll never leave these behind.
Where are you gonna go? Where are you gonna go, Thomas?
I gotta go! They're gonna find us and hunt us to the end of the earth. These Last Jedi haters, they know no bounds!
Fucking relentless. Where are you gonna hide? They'll get you anywhere.
I can't tell you, not anyone. I can't. Believe in the dream. The dream that we can love movies
Okay,
if we
Thomas.
want.
Okay.